This is Gerardo Del Real with Resource Stock Digest. Joining me today is the CEO of Leading Edge Materials, Mr. Filip Kozlowski. Filip, a long time coming. How are you today?
Very good, Gerardo. Thanks for calling. Really nice to be in touch with you now.
It's great to finally connect. I say a long time coming because you and I are familiar with each other, and we have been for years now. Leading Edge is a company that I've followed, frankly, since Flinders and Tasman, once upon a time, a decade or so ago, merged assets. And so you have a suite of critical metals projects that I believe is top notch, especially relative to the market cap. And we'll go ahead and talk about that here in a bit. But before we get into all of that, can you give us a brief overview of Leading Edge Materials? And then I want to get into your background, some of the management changes that were implemented recently, and why that's going to be very consequential for shareholders as you advance the suite of projects that you have.
Sure, and you summarized it very well. We have a portfolio of projects directed at what is called critical raw materials, and the other common denominator is the portfolio projects are located within the borders of the European Union. And I think that's core of the strategy, and will explain itself when we talk about the management change as well. So we have the Nora Shar rare earth project, which is a heavy rare earth project. It's one of the most significant heavy rare earth projects globally. And we've been developing that for over 10 years, where it was part of Tasman Metals before the merger. We also have the Voxna graphite mine, which was part of Flinders, which was restarted under the current ownership in 2014. And since then, we've been working on developing the very high purity processing technology to actually make a graphite product that is suitable to the higher value markets, such as lithium ion batteries, fuel cells, graphite foils for 5G implementation and so on. So those are our two main projects, and we then have an exploration project for lithium in Sweden as well, Bergby. We haven't done much work on that in the past, but we're looking to do more work there now again when we see lithium being more in focus again. And then the I guess the odd child in the family is our Romanian project, BRSUD, which, it's still within the European Union, but that's targeted at nickel cobalt, and we had to go there to find something interesting to look for, and so we're very much looking forward to that as well.
As far as the assets go, I want to start by talking about Nora Shar because it is a world-class heavy rare earth project. You and I know that there is a lot of attention and capital stepping into the rare earth space, and not just specifically rare earths, but critical metals. You have some very, very deep pockets that have a very vested interest in advancing an independent critical metal supply chain in the US, in Europe, and elsewhere. And of course, the elephant in the room is that China controls the vast amount of the production for rare earths and the processing. And so obviously that has some national security implications for regions across the world. And so while there's always been an emphasis on developing that critical metal supply chain, I don't believe there's been the structure, platform, and capital that exists now. So to that end, and before we get into Nora Shar, let's talk about the management. Can we start with your non-executive chairman and director, Lars-Erik Johansson? And then I'd love to touch on a few of the larger shareholders that are now very active and I think have their interest firmly aligned with shareholders moving forward.
Yeah, sure. And I think, what led to the management change and myself taking on the role that I am now is a natural progression of the company towards the next phase of developing our project. So we're both Tasman and Flinders were founded by some excellent and very successful Australian geologists. They were running the company from Australia, whereas all our projects are based in the European Union, and it's not so much about exploration anymore. It's more about development of the project and interacting with both local and the European stakeholders, whether it's local residents up until high-ranking European commissioners, to promote the project. And that is where that led to the change of the board of directors and myself stepping down as a director and taking on the role as a CEO. So having summarized that, with you mentioned the non-executive chairman Lars-Erik Johansson. He's a Swedish citizen, lives in London, has a very successful career behind him in the mining industry, where he, over the last decade, was the CEO of Ivanhoe Mines. And now, having stepped down from those roles, he was willing to share his experience and his network, seeing a potential to do something for the Swedish mining industry, seeing our two Swedish projects being unique in the sense that they could give a very sort of long overdue revitalization of the Swedish mining industry, where you take the critical raw material space as a stepping stone for doing something really relevant for the Swedish mining industry. So that's how we managed to attract him to our small company, as we have to confess in the scope of things. But we're very happy about that. And the other non-executive director is Daniel Major. He's the CEO of a uranium development company listed on TSX-V GOVX. He's also based in the UK. He's a British citizen. And the third director now is the largest shareholder, also a Swedish citizen, but living in Europe. And I think that is a very, I'm not sure how common that is in the sort of junior miners on the TSX-V, but seeing a shareholder putting his name up there as a director and looking after his shareholding and in the best interest of all shareholders, keeping the board and myself as a CEO accountable for delivering of what the shareholders need to see some return on their investment. So I think that's a very good structure. And putting that board together with myself, 3 out of 4 are Swedish citizens, and we're developing 3 Swedish projects. So I think we're very much aligned there, geographic, and this was something that was sort of coming for a while, but where this year, 2020, which is a terrible year in terms of COVID and how that has sort of hindered people to develop projects, that's a clear bonus of being located in the same time zone. I can drive up to the Voxna graphite mine in 3 hours. Nora Shar is 2.5 hour drive away. Sweden, whether you agree or not disagree, we haven't really had those strict lockdowns, so everything has been working fairly smoothly, I would say, from operational sense, locally. So I think we have that platform now, going from exploration to development, but really getting deep into the interaction with potential partners, potential support from politicians and the public stakeholders and the local stakeholders, and having a local presence. So I have my office in Stockholm, even though we're a Canadian company. We have a pretty broad base now of European shareholders, I would say, as well. So probably 50-50 split between North American shareholders and European shareholders at the moment. So we're becoming more of a European company, but that is to the benefit of the North American shareholders as well.
And I'll do my best to put that as bluntly as possible. That's a long-winded way, a very well-put way, but a very long-winded way of saying that you and the team in place now have the connections and the network locally and regionally to advance the multiple projects that you have forward. Is that accurate, Filip, you, Lars, Eric? I mean, this isn't a team that was brought together to, take a sub 30 million Canadian market cap company into a 50 million market cap Canadian company, right? This is in some ways a legacy project for many of the people now involved, and you're looking to grow this into, like you mentioned, the revival of critical metals mining in Sweden. Would that be accurate?
Sure, and I mean, in its simplest form, like one of the big criticisms that you always hear, like from public opposition to projects in Sweden. Here comes the Australians and the Canadians want to take our our mineral assets. It's not really the same thing anymore. I mean, we're Europeans. We're developing Swedish projects for Sweden and for Europe, and I think that that goes a long way for building trust and sort of confidence in what we're doing.
Well put. Let's get into the projects. You've been, despite COVID and the delays that many companies have suffered, you've been very active. You've initiated a PEA on Nora Shar. You've hired consultants to carry out a PEA at Woxna. Can we start with Nora Shar? And you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that Nora Shar will be the flagship moving forward, though Woxna is closely behind. Is that accurate, just with the amount of importance that the European region is placing on an independent rare earth supply chain that downstream? Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I would take a step back as well. Having discussed the management change, and another important aspect that happened over summer was the capital raise as well. With the new board and myself. So we were well funded and started looking at what can we do to start progressing these projects more aggressively. And where coming back to your comment, which one is the flagship? It's not really up to me to decide. And you can see, the Woxna graphite mine being a brownfield where you're only developing the downstream processes. It's clearly a more mature project in that sense. Maybe the timeline is shorter, but then on the other hand, where we have the huge policy support and the real need and the urgency to support projects is in the rare earth and the magnet supply chains. So, where it will end up is, I'm not comfortable in sort of deciding that, but I think they're both very well positioned for what is happening, because, where what we're seeing now in European Union is a huge support for becoming more self-reliant on raw materials, right? So, everyone's been able to follow Trump and executive orders and so on, but there's been a lot of work going on in the background in the corridors of Brussels over the year. And we're seeing those things materialize now after summer, where, the European Commission is talking about the strategic autonomy for the European Union. And that's quite strong wording for normally quite conservative European politicians. These things have been tried in the past as well, but there's a much stronger commitment where I would say beyond the point of return, where there's such commitment to this theme, and it links back into all the sort of stimulus that is going on in revitalizing economies after COVID, and the Green Deal becoming carbon neutral by 2050, China becoming carbon neutral by 2060. It's just this huge theme, it's this mega trend where there's much more longevity and much more commitment this time around, I would say.
Go ahead, Filip.
So I'm going to say about the project and where we identify what do we need to do to start moving these projects forward. For Nora Shar, and anyone that's has been following the Nora Shar project is well aware of the strength of the geographical location of the project and how close it is to infrastructure. But that has also been one of the challenges of the project, where it is an area that is not that used to greenfield development or mining projects. So on the one hand, we see great support and great demand for the project to go forward, but at the same time, there's challenges in terms of can it be done in a sustainable way and that doesn't sort of impact the local environment too much. So what we want to do there is really, the last TFS was done in 2016. Clearly, a lot of things have happened since then in terms of technological progress in the industry as a whole, in terms of new separation technologies being developed, new sort of test work on the processing for our project, have been tried. So, we want to take into account all of that work and all of that investment that has been done over the years, see what we can do with that, see how can we increase the resource efficiency of the project, and by doing so, what can we do to minimize the local impact of the project. And by doing that, obviously it's more sustainable project, but having a more sustainable project makes it, it's going to be higher probability of it going through the permitting process. And at the same time, more importantly, also being able to attract the support of the public sector and the European Commission and the Swedish government, saying this is a project we want to support. You've done your part of the equation, where you've proven that you've limited the local impact. We're now happy to support it from our side. So that's what we're doing there, and the press release quite, I recommend anyone to read about it, where the potential is for that, because 65% of the material at the moment is a material called methylene cyanide, and in the TFS, all of that went into the tailings facility, whereas that probably has some significant value in terms of a commercial product and industrial mineral. And what we're doing now as part of the PEA is defining how would the project look like if we don't treat that product as a waste, but treat it as something that we could sell, and the associated reduction in size of the tailings facility, the reduced sort of operating costs of treating it as a waste, and the potential byproduct credit that we could receive for it. So that's the first imminent step that we want to define of the project, and we think that is going to be should be a big step up for the project in terms of the local impact.
Well, and what makes Nora Shar so special is the fact that it's one of the world's principal heavy rare earth projects, correct? And this is critical, pun intended, for high strength permanent magnets. So if the European Union is going to pivot aggressively the way it has, and have battery directives and have mandates for clean energy and electric vehicle development, you can't do that without the materials, correct?
Yeah, very happy that you bring that up, because rare earth elements are normally bunched together, but you have the heavies and you have the light rare earths, and amongst both of those groups, you have some that are more critical, some that are less critical, and some are even waste at the moment. So I think that's a very important aspect, and one of the big allures of the Nora Shar project is it's so heavily enriched by dysprosium and terbium, which are some of the most valuable rare earth elements, and you can see how the heavies are becoming more and more in focus, and it's one of those areas where even China is struggling to find supply of the heavy rare earth elements, and so when you read news stories about China stockpiling, it's more commonly referred to the heavies rather than the light ones. So I think that is an extra allure of Nora Shar, definitely. And when Europe, when you read about their plans, the European Commission, they want to fivefold the capacity of offshore wind in Europe by 2030. They want to 20-fold increase it by 2050, and those heavies are required for those type of magnets that are in those wind turbines. And in any sort of electric motor that goes into a Tesla or an electric Volkswagen or anything. It depends if you're in the US or in Europe, whether you have a Volkswagen or a Tesla.
By when do you expect the results of the PEA so that shareholders can see what the next steps are?
Yeah, so we're moving back from a TFS to a PEA, and I think one of the aspects of that is trying to move swiftly on this, being able to demonstrate what the potential is. I would say within the next couple of months, depending on how things go with COVID, obviously. So at the moment things are running smoothly. We use international consultants. There might be problems with them having to travel and site visits, but within the next couple of months, we have Christmas and New Year, so it depends. But first quarter, definitely, and we'll be able to come out with how that study looks like.
Before I ask you about Woxna, I have to ask you about the misconceptions surrounding Nora Shar. I get emails often regarding the permitting status, regarding I had one the other day that I shared with you privately, where a potential shareholder was worried about the uranium content and the fact that they believed that the project would never be permitted and licensed, despite the fact that it's licensed, right, currently, because of the uranium content. Can you speak to that briefly, and then I'd love to talk about Woxna for a bit.
And you're bringing up another very important point, which is another one of the big benefits with Nora Shar. It's one of the rarest projects that has the absolutely lowest radionuclide content, by far. And this has always been mentioned and it's been identified. That has never really been proven. So, from a geological standpoint, we know, what sort of content is in there, but as part of the processing, it hasn't been well defined enough. And for a shareholder, maybe that is not as important as it is for your, local neighbor living in the summer house next to the project. We need to demonstrate very clearly through test work that, this is what it is. So, that's also an aspect that we want to demonstrate with these type of studies where we can, we do technological work with our consultants. We define what the radionuclide content is and the quotation of that through the process. And we can then take those documents back to the local regulators, the local stakeholders, and, clearly show them with scientific evidence, look, there's no risk with this. So that's what we want to do as well.
Excellent. Let's talk Woxna. Woxna for a very, very long time was the focus for Leading Edge, and I think obviously the quality and the importance of the project is again, pun intended, it's critical for the company moving forward, and a project that can greatly help benefit the European region in regards to supply. Can you talk about Woxna for a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we come back to this, which one is the flagship or not. I mean,
right.
There's two such great projects, so it's very hard to choose. One day you wake up and it's Woxna, the other day it's Nora Shar. So I think, I don't think we're prioritizing. We love both those children. Where the big benefit there being a brownfield, obviously, it's one of the very few Western world operational ready graphite mines. So, we've done a lot of work over the last years developing a thermal purification process to purify our graphite up until, 99.99% purity. It's a slightly different path from what is done at the moment, where, all Chinese products, and, do remember, which benchmark intelligence quite often reminds people about, China controls 100% of the lithium-ion anode precursor material in terms of processing of natural graphite. So, talking about criticality, that's 100%. It's not 98% like it is for rare earth. It's 100%. So there's a clear room for European supply to come online. The big benefit of thermal purification, which is becoming more obvious, is, when you have the European Union starting to talk about leveling the playing field against Asian supply of battery materials into Europe by, life cycle analysis and putting a number of the carbon footprint of that production is and the sustainability. It's quite clear having, 100% access to hydropower, which is zero carbon footprint, as close as you can get, very low cost in Sweden. We have a huge benefit there, both in terms of our processing costs and in terms of our environmental costs. And that is the main reason why we're going ahead with a PEA for the Woxna project, where I think what is important to understand is we're including the downstream processing. So whereas in the past the PEA was only done to include the graphite concentrate products, we're now including the downstream value-added steps of milling, cyaniding, and thermally purifying that material to be able to demonstrate, what's the economic potential here, what's the operational potential here, what product can we produce, how much could we sell it for, and how does that actually look like for an investor. Pretty similar as for Nora Shar. There's been a lot of work done over the last years. We're incorporating into the technical report, enabled to sort of have a document to be able to show investors this is what the project is about, this is what you can expect from the project going forward. Yeah, so I mean, graphite, we haven't touched that much upon the sort of European Raw Materials Alliance, but maybe this is an opportune time. So the European Raw Materials Alliance was just launched, a month ago, and it's pretty much building on the sort of staged rocket where the Green Deal that was launched last year, deploying €1 trillion of investment into industries that can help Europe become circular over the next 10 years. They realized that they need the raw materials and they can't rely on other regions for those raw materials. So how do they solve that? They launched an action plan on raw materials, and one of the bullet points in that action plan, we want to launch a raw materials alliance where we essentially bring together the whole value chains that need these raw materials and try to identify ways that we can support development of raw material supply in the European Union. And then, there's already a number of measures that are looking to implement. One is mitigating regulatory and financial bottlenecks. They're gonna launch a raw materials investment platform to stimulate investment into key projects. They specifically mentioned that they're gonna do sort of a screening and identify projects that could be operational by 2025. They will identify where they can support that. Another very important side of it is promote public awareness and acceptance of raw material supply from Europe. So the primary focus of that raw materials alliance is the rare earth and the magnet supply chains, because that's where the European Commission sees the biggest urgency. But it's clear that this will spread over to a number of raw material supply chains, graphite being one, lithium being one, cobalt being one. And it's just this huge platform where you're supporting the critical raw materials industry in Europe for Europe. And as part of that, there's a lot of stakeholder consultation processes. Due to the uniqueness of our two projects, we've been heavily involved in that. And coming back to the PEAs that we're doing for both the projects, we want to use those documents both towards investors to be able to demonstrate what the projects look like going forward. But as much we're doing it for those kind of forums, which is almost as important, even for our shareholders, that we can demonstrate to potential partners, to potential future customers, to the politicians, what projects do you actually have for, what's the timeline, how do they look like, what's the investment case here. So that's what we're doing in that framework.
I know that you have a suite of projects in Romania that you are working to finalize licenses for, and I've already taken up 30 minutes of your time, Filip. So I want to bring you back to talk about those. And I know there's been some delays with the courts because of COVID. And I also know that you've done some work with the Bergby lithium project in the past. And again, I want to make sure that we chat about those, but I don't want to take away attention from your two flagships, let's call it that, Woxna and Nora Shar. But before I let you go, I have to ask you about the new Chinese export restriction law, which everyone is anticipating the implementation of, which is, I believe, December the 1st. It seems like with the $3.5 million that you raised Canadian in the summertime, the simultaneous PEAs on Woxna and Nora Shar, the platform now with the European Raw Materials Alliance and the mandate that is spreading across Europe and elsewhere, but for you strategically, Europe is the main event there. I have to ask you about the implementation of that restriction law and what you see developing as a result of that. And obviously that leads into what sounds like a very, very important and critical time for Leading Edge in Q1 of 2021.
Yeah, no, for sure. And this is sort of, it's been well talked about, and it's one of these firm deadlines. This is being implemented and it becomes effective on the 1st of December. Anyone guess what China will do, but it's a clear time, and I guess everyone is a bit nervous about that, what will happen. Having said that, I couldn't see any, the support is already there. I mean, the urgency is already raised in terms of, the support that is being committed to this industry. So I think if there's anything happening, everyone is sort of more prepared now, but it's definitely causing some nervousness in the market. And you can see rare earth prices are moving up. You could see Chinese rare earth companies are moving up. It's definitely one of these, hot topics, but where the outcome is very much unknown. But it's something to keep an eye on what happens there. It's very much near term in 2 weeks' time. So, as you mentioned, we have a platform in place. I'm super busy with everything going on, but it's a well and clear defined path forward where we had the management change, we raised money, we're now deploying the money to the projects. We talked a lot about Nora Shar now. We're spending some small money to identify what can we do to progress the Burby lithium project further as well, which has been very much underexplored. Even though it's a great discovery in the context of Swedish lithium deposits. You've mentioned Romania. Yeah, that's I would say that's the one project where we've been impacted by COVID, where we're waiting for a final judgment from the court. The courts are affected by COVID, simple as that. So I think having followed the company, you followed the company for longer than me, Gerardo. So, but I think there's been a number of years where the sentiment was pretty poor against battery materials, critical raw materials. But just being part of this whole industry over the last 6 months, where a complete shift in sentiment, seeing sort of Tesla going into further upstream in the lithium value chain, seeing European automakers getting involved in sourcing raw materials, seeing some of our competitors and the stock prices, and you can see investors are coming back, and there's definitely positive wins in the industry, and I think we're definitely positioned well for that going forward.
You mentioned higher graphite and rare earth prices. Several of the companies, and let me be frank, many companies which don't have a quarter of the quality of portfolio that Leading Edge Materials have moved up 2, 3, 4-fold here in the past couple of months. I suspect that the next several months will be just as favorable for Leading Edge. And again, you have multiple catalysts in the queue. So I'm really, really looking forward to the end of the year and 2021. Filip, I want to thank you for your time. Is there anything else that you'd like to add that we didn't cover?
No, thank you, Gerard. This was long overdue as we started the call, and I'm very much looking forward to the next time. And I think the most suitable time would be when we can start presenting some results from these studies, and we'll have even more to discuss at that point. Looking forward to that.
Excellent, Filip. Thank you for your time. You have a good one out there. Stay safe.
Have a nice day, Gerard.
Thank you so much. Bye. All right, bye now.